Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to Apple Tech Talks, and it's been a while. I'm sorry for not making videos. I've actually gotten a couple subscribers and my channel is kind of growing still. So thank you guys so much for that, for watching my videos while I've been gone. I'm back in New York now, making videos, having fun. So let's just, without any further ado, get into today's video. And if you haven't realized already, the video is about what iOS does better than Android. So in this video, which is another episode of my top 10 series, I'm basically going to tell you 10 reasons why in 2019 iOS is better than Android. So let's go. Number one, older device compatibility. You know, just thinking about how long Apple supports their iOS devices for. They support it for years and years and years. I believe the iPhone as old as the 5S or the 6, which came out 5-6 years ago, still support the latest firmware. So Apple is really committed to keeping products longevity very strong, and I can really see that in their products. They make a big effort to do that, and I'm sure it's not easy with how complicated the software is getting. So props to Apple for that. And the benefit of this is that Apple has significantly higher adoption rates for their new software that comes out every year. And every year when they show their results from the previous year's adoption rate at WWDC, it's always around 90% or even higher than that, 80 to 90% adoption rate. And there's a lot of iPhones, if you think about it, out there, whereas on the Android side, you have adoption rate at less than 15%, less than 10%. It's really quite pathetic. So the second reason is that there's AirDrop. So there isn't really, as far as I'm concerned, any notable equivalent on Android. And basically AirDrop was actually created in response to something Samsung had, which I can't remember the name of. Basically, you could transfer files by bumping your phone against another Samsung Galaxy phone, and it was cool and all, but it didn't really go very far, and Apple took that to the next level with AirDrop. And AirDrop is a very underrated feature in my opinion. I feel like a lot of people don't know about it, and a lot of people don't use it. Basically, using the Bluetooth connection of your iPhone, it will transfer files, which is whether it's photos, videos, documents, etc., over to another Apple device, and it could be an iPad, iPhone, Mac, etc., iMac, etc., and it works really well. And furthermore, because it's over a Bluetooth connection, you don't need any sort of internet connection to do it. So you can do it on planes, and it's very seamless. It only takes a second. Of course, you have to be within a certain vicinity of one another, but as long as you fulfill that condition, this feature is amazing. And guys, let me know in the comment section below, am I missing an Android alternative? Because I feel like this is a big hole in Android's feature set. So the third reason that iOS is still better than Android is because it has better compatibility with computers such as Macs, and also with tablets such as iPads, way more than the Android side. I've said in previous videos, and this is pretty much the general consensus from tech critics and tech reviewers, and which is basically that iPads are way better than any other tablet in the market. And while tablets itself might be a dying product line, iPads are actually at the top of that food chain. So it only makes sense that because iOS runs on iPads, iOS has an inherent advantage over any Android tablets that are running, because basically Android, whether or not it's better or worse, the actual design of Android tablets are worse, the compatibility with phones is worse, everything is just worse and not as well optimized on Android. It's just really fragmented. Whereas on the iPad side, on iOS's side, you still have a lot of optimized apps, and the iOS software is very optimized. All the stock apps for iOS are optimized for the iPad display, and you just don't feel the same kind of optimization and compatibility on Android side. So the fourth reason now that iOS is better than Android is that there's no bloatware in iOS. You don't get any bloatware out of the box. Bloatware is basically all those carrier bundled apps and the junk apps that can't be uninstalled. And basically, you get a lot of that on iOS, and I mean, you get a lot of that on Android, and especially on Samsung devices, it's pretty bad. They're getting better, but there's still a lot of carrier bundled apps you can't uninstall. Whereas on the iOS side, you do have no bloatware at all, and it feels very different experience. And yeah, totally, Google has a stock Android experience that offers virtually no bloatware, but that means you specifically have to use Google's Pixel. And if you don't want to use it, if you prefer to use like pretty much any other Android phone out there, it's a lot more difficult to uninstall that bloatware. So the fifth reason now is that it's the favored mobile platform of choice for app developers. And this is a big deal for pretty much any app you use, especially social media apps that require the camera. So basically, if you haven't already realized, a lot of the apps like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, WhatsApp, etc., they're just a lot better optimized on iOS than they are on Android. So I'm thinking specifically Snapchat and Instagram. I've used them both extensively on both iOS and Android devices, and I have to say, on iOS devices, it just feels a lot better. It's the optimization one, and things are just not as laggy, and also the camera optimization when you actually use the camera to take pictures to post is also just the UI is just way more optimized, and in general you can tell that the iOS app developers specifically could make their app, their Instagram, Snapchat, whatever app in general for iOS specifically, so they were able to optimize it as best they could, whereas on Android side there's just so much fragmentation and so many different variants of every product that the app developers simply don't want to deal with it, and so they just make one general layout for all of Android, and you sort of get like a scaled version depending on the display size and the type of product you have of the app, and it's honestly quite annoying after a while. So reason number six is that there's better device and software support on the iOS side. So for Apple, you have Apple Care Plus and iPhone warranty, and on Android side you do have customer service as well, but it's just not as good as Apple. Apple has drilled it. They all don't have a huge, wide, expansive line of products, and their products overall, the UI is very simple, and while it's the most advanced operating system in the world, it's not the most complicated. And Google's side, it's just really hard to have universal customer support with all the different Android devices that exist out there. So customer support and device warranty definitely better on iOS's side, and it's just not really something that's disputed, and it's really important in certain situations. So reason number seven is iMessage. So there's no equivalent to iMessage on Android. iMessage is basically instant messaging service that exists on iOS between iOS devices, and there's no great alternative on Android right now. You'd have to use regular text messaging, and this can be primitive, annoying, and just in general unpleasant. So on Android side, you have apps like Allo, which has been Google's attempt to bring it to the market. You had Hangouts, Google Messenger, and none of them really work. It's just regular text messaging on Android. And iMessage is just an amazing experience. I really suggest that you use it if you have an iOS device, if you're not already using it, which you should be because it's enabled out of the box. Reason number 8 is better security and privacy. I've talked about this in previous videos. Google's just generally not as good at privacy and security for the devices as Apple is. Apple has sort of sacrificed a lot of features, and specifically to have that extra security and privacy, and it comes at the expense of other things. But if you're someone who cares a lot about security and privacy, you should for sure use an Apple device. It's just way more secure, and you know that Apple is not collecting any of your data for developers, for advertisers, whereas Google is. Reason number 9 is that it's worth more to resell an iPhone than an Android phone. So for those of you who are looking to get a new phone and want to resell your old one, better value for your iPhone than your Android phone. Pretty simple reason right there. I think it's pretty self-explanatory why it makes more sense to use an iPhone in that case than an Android phone. And then finally, reason number 10, and I think this is probably the biggest reason honestly, is that there's an easier learning curve to iOS. It's just so much easier in 2019, even though it's getting increasingly more complicated and more complex and more sophisticated on both platforms, iOS is just the easier one to learn. It's something to do with the way Apple has laid it out, specifically intending for it to be as intuitive as possible. They put a lot of thought into that, and Android just hasn't, and especially with all the other phone manufacturers, third-party phone manufacturers who are adding their own skins to the Android software, making it even more complicated, not putting the same kind of careful thought into it. It shows. It's just not as meticulously crafted. It's just sort of a messier experience. Of course, it still looks very nice and it still works very well. I'm just saying that the actual layout and for people to learn it is much harder. And iOS's side, You know, I always tell elderly people that if they are thinking about getting a smartphone, definitely get an iOS phone. It's really hard to learn like a Samsung Galaxy phone or Google Pixel phone. It's a lot harder. Yeah, I guess stock Android is pretty simple to use compared to the rest of the variants of Android on other smartphones, but iOS is just the king right now of that. So anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video. That was a weak clap. Anyway guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, I will see you in the next video very soon. As always, thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.